I am here with Quentin Williams, who is a former two-sport Big Ten athlete, a Gator Bowl champion, and the founder and CEO of World Class. So how are we doing today, Quentin?
I'm doing great. Should I call you Iggy? Should I call you Jake?
Either one works for me, man. It's something that's kind of funny is people always ask, where did Iggy come from? And my last name is Ignazewski, and so all throughout my life, people have had a really difficult time being able to say that. And I would always call my grandparents, grandma and grandpa Iggy, and I'm like, you know what? Might as well just take that as a shorter version of my last name, so it makes it easier for people to say.
I like it, man. I like it. I
Appreciate
have
it.
a friend from high school who went by Iggy, so let's go
That's
with
fun.
that, man. Yeah.
Awesome works for me. It's funny because people always go, you stole Andre Iguodala, the basketball player's nickname, and I'm like, I didn't steal anything. I'm like, no, I'm just repurposing it in my own way. But where are you calling in from today?
I'm in San Diego, California.
Oh, there you go. I've always heard that San Diego has the nice 75-degree weather, not too hot, not too cold, and never too humid either.
It's exactly right, man. You can't get better weather than San Diego. I mean, it's basically a desert here, but then
Makes
people
sense.
planted trees and everything they wanted here way back in the days to make it more livable. And
Makes
it's
sense.
incredible. It has its own little climate. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, so I'm an East Coaster.
There you go.
Lived in Chicago for a number of years, and then made my way out here about 4 years ago. And I don't know if I can ever leave, man. It's great. It's sunny. It's probably 60 today.
Makes sense.
In the winter, really, really blessed to be here.
I love it. That's one place I've always wanted to go to. Luckily, I just started working for an arena football team who's actually going to be playing in San Diego, so I'll have the opportunity to go out there. But yeah, I'm in New Hampshire right now. Funny enough, even though we're recording on December 15th, we had snow, our first snowfall this past week, and then it just went 50 to 60, and you can't get any more New England weather than that.
Oh man, dude. Yeah. I I know that feeling. I mean, that's how the East Coast is, thankfully. Like
Yeah.
it can be a little bit fickle. When I lived in Chicago, man, like it was the same snow that fell in December, you would still see it on the ground in March
That's
or in
funny.
April sometimes.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't melt, but at least in the East Coast, you get the sun to come out, it'll melt the
Hmm.
snow, and
Right.
it'll be at least a little fickle. It'll give you a little bit of something to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the type of person where I'm a big skier, so if like there's no snow on the ground, I'm not able to play in the snow. There's no reason for it to be cold, in my opinion.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I living in Chicago is wonderful, and like without hills, to be able to ski, I'm like, what's the purpose of this snow? Like, what
Right.
is the
Yeah,
purpose of
exactly.
it? So I'm
I
with you.
love it. Well, so I usually like to start off these episodes, talking about looking back at the last year. And something that I've tried to focus on myself is, with everything that's going on right now, it doesn't matter like what stresses you have in your life. Like, where were you on January 1st and where are you today? And just being proud of like how far you've come. And especially with how, weird 2020 was, where it was just riddled with the pandemic. Um, Looking back on this past year, what are some of the favorite moments of 2021 for you?
Wow. I mean, where I started, I started my business less than 2 years ago. So
Wow,
over this past year, I officially gave up my corporate job, moved into this full time,
I love it.
and people will tell you this probably a lot, but entrepreneurship is a whole spiritual journey and a spiritual battle. It
Mhm.
really it's just like being in a marriage,
Makes
or
sense.
any important relationship or sport. It shows you who you are. It really um, forces you to really confront who you've been being and who you really have always wanted to be and who you are at the core. And it challenges every area of your life. So I feel really proud to say that I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've grown so much over the last couple of years, and especially in the last year, taking this on full time.
I love it. And
Yeah.
obviously when people, take that leap to be an entrepreneur, to, start their own business, be their own boss, it's always out in the back of their mind, like, how am I going to be able to monetize this? Am I going to be able to make the same amount of money as, as I was with my corporate job? And something that I always try to focus on is worry less about the money and more about doing what you love. And obviously
Hmm.
money is the way that you survive in this society, but I'd rather do a job where I feel like I'm not even working. I'm just doing my passion. I'm doing what I love.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that, we can relate this a little bit to like the athlete mentality, but, um, as athletes, I think a lot of us have been sort of brought up to think like we have to be doing something hard for it to be productive, for it has to be, um, you know, difficult for it to be worth it.
Mm,
And what I've found is, just like you've also found in sport, is like when you really enjoy it, when you really love it, you play a lot better, and you tend to make more money in sport and in life and in business. So if you do enjoy it and you do try to enjoy it, then everything gets better, man. So I believe we're meaning making machines. Like we
mm,
literally create our own meaning and our own purpose.
right.
And so if you can't find purpose in something, try a little harder, and then maybe try something else. Because it's we're supposed to find meaning in what we do. Um, it's not supposed to be a drag. You know.
1000%. Yeah, in my opinion, it's all about the perspective that we have, the reality that we paint for ourselves. And as difficult as it is to, allow those outside pressures that are made up by society or our parents, that we have to be somewhere at some point in our life instead of just, enjoying where we are today and trying to get to that point where we're finding our purpose in something that we love. I think that's really all that matters, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's paramount.
1000%. And you are somebody who, like you mentioned, you're a two sport athlete, baseball and football. And I want to talk a little bit about that, especially like growing up, because as myself, as somebody who went through baseball and little league, those two sports, parents can get very passionate about it. And, towns can also get very passionate about it and invested in it. And how was your experience, being a two sport athlete? And were you one of those kids who was like good throughout your entire like early time playing it, or were you sort of like a late bloomer?
It kind of depends on which sport you're talking about. Yeah, because I had so in Pittsburgh, football is king,
Right.
and the first sport that I learned that I was good at was baseball, and which was great. That was the first time I felt like acknowledged for something aside from just being me. I was now being acknowledged for like what I could do. I was 7 years old. The coaches at the first practice that I was at, first organized baseball practice, had my new mid out. I was throwing, standing on the left field, line, and then my partner was across from me, and we were throwing, and the coaches started congregating behind me, and I couldn't figure
Mm.
out why. I thought maybe I was doing something wrong,
Right.
and I hear them start talking like, "Oh, Quentin got he has a good arm. Wow, okay, cool." And they started watching me, and they started like paying attention to me, and I thought that
Mm.
was pretty cool. And I like to ask athletes that same question, like, when did you kind of realize, that you were good at this, or that you had potential in it, or that you were being acknowledged for what you were doing and what you could do?
Mm.
And I think that's an important moment because, up until that time in my life, like, I guess I always felt kind of different. I always felt like a little bit out of, like I didn't really fit in. And so this was a way for me to fit in with something that was important, although it wasn't football in Pittsburgh, it was baseball. It felt like I was fitting in, which was great. And I was also standing out. So that's a really awesome balance. And so it was a natural inclination for me to really invest in it. I was a young kid, but made an all-star team that turned into a travel team. We went to Cooperstown, won our week in Cooperstown. If you're familiar with that, probably being the East
Yep.
Coast, you know what that is. And then fast forward through high school, I got drafted out of high school to the Blue Jays, but went to college instead. So that was my baseball journey. I pretty much knew I was good since I started. But football was a little bit different. Like football, I was always like a bigger kid. I was always taller and a little bit. My brother would say chubby, like a little bit chubby. But I was always bigger, and so I would always actually play up on my brother's teams. I would always be too heavy to play with the guys that were my age, which really gave me an awesome advantage. Right. But I never was really thought of to be like, like I'm going to go and play Division I football, right? Like I actually had a coach, one of our coaches when I was in midget football. He had like he had like a streak of his own where he had been in the program for like 20 years, and he would literally call out each kid that would end up going Division I. And he had like a perfect winning streak with that. He could predict it. Mm-hmm. And he had guys that went to West Virginia. Mark Bolger played in my same, Pee Wee team.
Oh, wow.
He played for West Virginia. He picked out guys that would go to Pitt, go to smaller schools, but he could always pick out who was going to go D1. And he picked my brother to go D1. And he said that I wouldn't go D1. Mm. And it just, not that it like motivated me any, but it was really fun, like to kind of play around with that. Once I kind of realized like I was good at this, once I was like age 9 and playing up with the 11-year-olds, once I was age 12, playing up with the 13-year-olds, like that was just so cool. And then when I was a freshman in high school, I got brought up to varsity. And all of a sudden, I was competing with my brother and all of his friends and all these guys that were seniors that were going on to play college football. One guy went to Pitt. One guy went to Kent State. Mm-hmm. Like I was playing with like some incredible talent as a freshman.
Right.
And so, I think it was really then when I realized like, oh, I can go D1 in this thing, and I can really prove that guy wrong. Right.
Right.
Again, not that was my like motivation, but there is something internal there when like you're not expected to do something,
right? 100%.
And you just go and do it, And so, to answer your question, like, was I always good, or did I always know that I always had this vision or goal? Like, I don't know if I ever did. Like, I just kept, getting better and better, and I just tried to really focus. And I had the benefit of having an older brother who was playing ahead of me that I could play on his team. Even in baseball, that they would pull me up to pitch once in a while, and I would get to pitch against some of the best competition in the area,
That's cool.
So I felt really blessed by my athletic career, also being brought up in a place like Pittsburgh where football is so important. It's so important to the lifeblood of the area, and there's really good programming, and people really take it seriously. And, to that extent, I think I always tried to not let my identity get caught up in the sport, because just like that 7-year-old who realized he had a good arm, like I didn't want to just be known for having a good arm.
Right.
I didn't want to just be known for being a bigger kid who could take on 11-year-olds at 9 years old, Like, yes, that felt good. It felt like I could be physically dominant, and there's something within us that's sort of primal. It's sort of like just within us that wants to be dominating physically, right? But I didn't want that to define me. I wanted to have a heart. I wanted to be, human, not just a superhuman.
Yeah, 100%. And I bet, especially like growing up, like you mentioned, you were drafted out of high school, you were freshman year, picked for the varsity team. I can only imagine sort of like what sort of pressure that held, especially potentially at times being shadowed by your brother. And I'm an only child, so I never really had to deal with that. But I just remember myself, competing for spots on a varsity baseball team, just the pressure that you have to live up to those expectations. And especially if you do good one year, they expect you to, live up to that and even get it even better.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting that people like this comes up a lot with people, but like I can't say that I ever felt the pressure. Like I really, and I was actually just talking to a client earlier. So I'm a men's coach for retired athletes, and I was just talking to a client of mine who who does feel that. He even feels that right now to this day. He's long gone out of sports, but he feels that pressure to perform or to live up to some certain expectation or to be a certain way, to squeeze life for all it's worth, to put his potential to work. And like, I definitely felt some pressure, you know, like especially if my dad like really had a lot of passion for what I was doing, and he really had invested a lot of time and energy and money. And, you know, I feel so blessed that I came from a family that could afford to send me to travel baseball, you know, to travel around the country and get me to practices 45 minutes away, to go to a private high school that was a powerhouse school that like led Pennsylvania pretty much every year. Like I feel really, really blessed. And I think sometimes I took that for granted, you know. I don't know if I really felt the pressure to perform based on that, but I feel very grateful that I never really felt pressured too much, you know what I mean, from those around me. I guess I tried to just revert it back to like, you know, running my race. And this is exactly what I said to my client today. I said, like, there's that famous kind of picture. It's not that famous, but you know, you've probably seen a picture like this before, where there's two guys running a race on a track, and one is focused on winning the race and just looking at the finish line, running through the line. Right. And then the other one's like looking at the guy who's winning. Like, oh, how am I? He's running fast. I gotta speed up. Or what's he doing that I'm not doing that I could do better? You know. And we're running two races when we should really just be running one. And it's that comparison. It's that pressure that we put on ourselves. It's the phones and the social media and present day, right? Where we start running other people's races. And that's when we get in trouble. That's when we are overwhelmed with the amount of energy we're diverting everywhere around us, when really we're only running one race. And it's really pretty simple if we just stay focused, you know?
1,000. I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I think that's where pressure comes from, you know? I think when we're focused on running someone else's race, or what direction someone thinks we should be running, or maybe we're following someone else's measuring for success. Yeah. That's when we feel pressure, you know? That's when it doesn't feel good, because pressure you can feel it in your body. I like to coach the body too, like not just what you feel emotionally, but like, how does that feel in your body? Like, do you feel excited about that? Does your body feel tight or tense, or does it feel expansive, excited? Does it feel like there's, you know, blood rushing through your veins, or do you feel like everything's stagnant? And those are all signs for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I felt something similar. I just recently graduated college in May, and you know, that pressure to get a job right out of college is huge. And I mean, it's the stigma made by, you know, our parents, that's instilled in us by society, that you have to get a job out of college and you got to know what you want to do. And then obviously, like you mentioned, now with social media, you're seeing other people doing things that you've always wanted to do. And you're like, why am I not here? You know, beating yourself up for like not being in that exact position, when like that's not your journey. You're in exactly where you're supposed to be, but you got to be able to accept that, and you need to be able to realize that, you know, everything happens for a reason. Not everybody's journey is going to be exactly the same. But I think the comparison is a huge problem right now in our society, and it's a lot to do, like you mentioned, with social media. It's something that I deal with every day.
And you know, social media it's there to, you know, and I deal with it too, by the way, right? Like I run my business mostly on social media. And so naturally there's the inclination to be on it a lot, and it can be a tool to connect us and to get the word out, you know? But just like anything, you know, when not used in moderation, it can be really devastating, the impact that it has on us. Because we're in the information age, like we have access to everything and anything that we want at a moment's notice. Yeah. And, you know, it's a blessing and a curse. So yeah, I always just say, try to stay in your lane, and you shouldn't, I don't think we're always going to feel some pressure, because we're societal beings, we're social beings, we run in packs, right? And we're ultimately, you know, we're all challenged with doing things that are best for the common good, you know, that also align with our good, what feels good for us, where we fit, in line. Um, but I think, you also got to run your race.
Yeah.
You got to take your shot,
Mm.
and focusing on other people and the way that they operate is not going to help you do your job, because your job is unique. Your job is different than everybody else's.
Yeah, 1000%. And I
Yeah.
think it's also a lot how you use social media. I think you do it in a great way to help influence other people. I think the word influencer isn't used correctly a lot of the times. An influencer is somebody who has millions of followers and flaunts what they have that other people
Mm-hmm.
don't. And actual influencers help influence people to be the better versions of themselves. And like you mentioned, it helps people connect. I mean, that's how we got connected. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a huge thing. But yeah, that whole race, and I bet especially with like sports as well, going back to that a little bit of what school somebody went to, what sort of preparation team this person's on, and this person got drafted out of high school, but I'm playing college baseball. Like they could potentially get to the higher point that I want to faster than I do. But I mean, it's all about like life isn't a race. It's all about you focusing on your path, and being grateful where you are and what you've been able to do along that way.
Mm-hmm. It is. And, kudos to you too for starting a podcast, fresh out of college. Congratulations on graduating. And at the
Thanks,
same
man.
time, really pursuing what you're excited about, what you want to talk about, and, being yourself. I think that I don't know, like, what does it feel like for you to be doing your own thing?
So I mean, I switched my major after junior year of college, and I was told by my advisor, it's gonna be really difficult for you to get a job out of college. The competition is gonna be insane. And I went to a university that didn't have a journalism program, didn't have a media program, didn't have any of this. And so I started this up as my to build my brand, to not only get reps as well, but at the end of the day, it's been really cool, connecting with people like yourself, being able to talk about things deeper than sports. That's something that I've always been interested in, not talking about, so and so signed so and so, and this team traded a guy for this team for this guy, and really understanding that we all have a voice. How am I going to use this microphone to potentially influence people and help people be happier than they were before watching this? And I think that's a huge thing so many people don't really think about, and something that I saw on your Instagram that I've really tried to focus on a lot more is what's going to be your legacy. Even though it's super deep, and sometimes you don't want to think about this, but at your funeral, how are people going to remember you? And it's just honestly the reality. And that's something that I think that we need to all focus on, is trying to live our legacy every single day.
There's a few taboos in life, like that you don't talk about at the dinner table. It's holiday season, right? Like, one of them is death.
Yeah.
You just don't talk about it. You don't talk about who's died or who is dying or who's sick. Whenever that topic comes up, everyone kind of just gets like, they shut down.
Mm.
We shut down around these taboo topics. And I think that um, I'm always the person that says the taboo topic at dinner,
I know what you mean.
I'm always that guy. I talk about sex, money, religion, politics, at dinner. I'm not afraid of that. Because I think that what we're afraid of has a lot to teach us.
Mm.
And the same goes for death. I think when we really ask ourselves, and actually, like, Iggy, that's like where I was able to fully like own my business and own my identity after sport, was when I actually asked myself, like, if I were to die today, like, what would my legacy be? What would my epitaph be on my gravestone?
Mm-hmm.
What would they write about in my obituary? How would people talk about me? Would they talk about me for a week and forget?
What to think about?
Does my legacy live on? Did I pass anything on to anybody else that, so they can carry the torch and the purpose that I stood for? Or did I just keep it all to myself?
Mm-hmm.
Did I keep it all like in my heart? Did I have a life and a love that just stayed with me, and disintegrated after death? Or did I put it out there? Did I go for it? And there's so much to be gained by living your purpose, and there's going to be so many critics and so many people that try to infiltrate your race, but it does not matter. It does not matter. So forget the pressure, run your race, and yeah, man, I think there's something really enlivening about that. Like I said
100%.
earlier, like you can feel it in your body when you feel pressured, you feel more stuck, and you kind of feel like in your body like a little stagnant. But when you're living your purpose and you're doing things that challenge you, that are just uncomfortable and challenge your way of thinking and probably challenge, your own self-belief and your doubts and everything, that when you feel it, that that's not constricting, that's actually expanding. And you can feel that blood running through your veins. You can feel that pulse in your heart. And that's a body sensation you got to pay attention to, because that means you're on the right track.
Yeah, 1000%. And I've had, we've all had plenty of doubters or people that say that we can't do it. It's funny, when right out of college, I was working at Dunkin' Donuts, and I had a guy say to me, "When are you going to get a real job?" And that hurt me a little bit. It hurt my ego a little bit, made me a little bit insecure about what I was doing. And at the end of the day, I needed to remember those times when, I was super excited about getting a job. I'll never forget, sometimes when you get super excited about something, like, and it connects with your why, and you just get this whole body experience of just seeing excitement. It's nothing like you can ever really experience. And I think being able to be open and talking about that is huge. I mean, it's especially as men. The conversation of legacy, the conversation of what's your passion, the conversation of even how are you doing? Are you okay? In terms of conversations that men have, I don't think it's talked about enough. It's usually, what girl are you trying to get? Oh, you trying to go out tonight? Did you see the game last night? And I get it. That's all great. That's all great talking points. But like when you have friends and you're not able to have those deeper conversations than surface level, I think it's tough to truly call them a close friend.
Yeah, and there's something you said a minute ago. We actually talked about this offline, like before we started recording, I think, like about this concept of like, you love sports so much because it represents feeling fully lit up and on fire. It represents like the human potential, the possibilities when we all come together as a team. It represents that tribal mentality and that team camaraderie. And there's a visceral feeling that we get when we're on the right path, and we're succeeding and we're celebrating and we are emotional, right? A lot of men think like they're not emotional people, but if you watch them on a baseball field or a football field, like there's a lot of emotion there, And so like it's within all of us. And for some reason, people think you can't have that off the field. And I think I even heard you say that, like, like you can't experience what you experience in sports anywhere else, And, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think that there's a certain type of feeling that you get playing sports that's hard to replicate in the real world. But I do think that we can experience passion. We can experience that excitement. We can experience the full fledge of emotions outside of sport. And it when you feel it, And my real message and my mission to guys is that you can have a full spectrum emotional experience outside of sport. You don't just experience the highs and the lows and the excitement of sports in sports, but you can feel that in your real life. You can feel that in your connection, in the depth that you have with your loved ones, the devotion you have to your purpose and your career, and all the relationships that you have, the relationship you have with yourself. Do you feel like you're committed and disciplined and focused on running your race for yourself so that you can live a long life? These are all the things that as athletes we can correlate and we can translate over into our real life, from the field.
1000%. I think I'm interested to hear what you say about this, but especially as like a football player, they're taught to be tough and have that grit and show no emotion and work your butt off until the game is over and tackle those guys into the ground. And especially after playing football at Northwestern, how were you able to sort of feel comfortable being vulnerable and being able to show that emotion and, talk about mental health? Because like you mentioned, you were a big guy, you were a defensive lineman, and a lot of times people would see those football players and be like, that person can't easily show emotion. And so how are you able to overcome that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great analogy too, because you look at football as a perfect example. The number one emotion you probably see on a football field is either celebration or what? It's probably anger.
Yeah,
That's
the first thing that came
like,
to mind.
I'm gonna kick your ass. I'm gonna
Yeah,
beat the crap out of you. I'm gonna run you over.
exactly. It's
Right?
me against you.
Dominate you.
Mm,
And coming back to like kind of the primal aspects of us, like we're animals, right? At the end of the day, and before we started living civilly, we were very violent, and I think that as men, especially, our instinct is to use anger as defense, as a primary emotion,
right.
the front face of our stature. Use anger, and actually, anger is historically like really something that we use to protect ourselves, to protect our young, to protect the women in our life, to protect more socially like our ego.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing is, like, on the football field, we use it to protect, what we stand for, the game, the win that's on the line, protect our ego, even, of like who's the bigger man. And the point I'm trying to get across is that all we experience is anger in football. Like we don't experience the other core emotions of joy. We do experience that, right? But shame, guilt, anger, sadness, fear, those things don't enter our mind very often, and for good reason. Like, I think that, as a football player, like, we are taught, we are shown and demonstrated and exemplified that, like, if we can turn our fear into anger, we can put it to use.
Mm-hmm.
If we can turn our guilt or shame about the last play and how that didn't go well into anger on the next play, we can put it to good use.
Right.
When I played Mad, I played lights out. Lights out. Like, when I cut it loose, and I had a lot to be angry about. Like, when I was 15, my mom passed away. I was a freshman in high school. So that time when I got brought up to varsity, my mom had just passed away that year. And so sophomore, junior, senior year, I had some of the most badass highlight films, as a football player, like just running around the field. Right. There were plays where there's actually a play that's on film, on my highlight film, of me tackling two people in one play. I tackled the quarterback, and he just barely got a pass off, a screen pass off. I got up and I tackled the running back 5 yards downfield, because I was that adamant. I had that much energy and anger and emotion stirring in me that I wanted to I had a motor, I just wanted to get it out of me. And the thing is, after sports, I talked about this offline with you, if you don't have an outlet for your emotions, especially when they might be more than just anger, they might be underneath the surface, it might be guilt or shame or, regret. It might be sadness. It might be fear about the future. All these emotions, most men surface those in real life as just anger.
Yeah.
It's because that's what we're used to, right? And that's not just an athlete's experience. It's a lot of men's experience. We just resort to anger, and we get defensive and frustrated and angry, and we throw things and we hit things, and we say things that we don't want to say out of anger. When, my own experience with that was, coming out of sport, like, I would get angry with people, because I was trying to find my way. I was trying to start a business, and I was talking about it, and I wouldn't actually do it, and I procrastinate. And, like, when it came down to it, I would get angry at people that were really close to me. But when I really started to slow down, and thanks to some men's groups that I was a part of, thanks to a leadership development program that I joined, I was able to see that when I really slowed down, that anger wasn't about anger. I was actually embarrassed.
Makes sense.
I was embarrassed.
Right.
I was mad at myself
Mm-hmm.
for not having done it sooner. I was mad that I wasn't confident enough in myself. I was mad that I lost my swag.
Hmm.
That I was afraid that I was going to be some washed up football player,
Yeah.
you know,
Makes sense.
living back home, you know, right? Like, and a lot of football players have that same fear.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I had like the most dope education you could get, like I had a master's degree from Northwestern, I still had those fears. Like, what if I don't figure it out, you know? And again, those fears, those more core emotions often get presented as anger if we're not aware of it. And so a lot of the work that I did and I do with guys now is to really unpack that anger,
Mm-hmm.
find healthy outlets for it so that we can digest it and we can really see what's at the core of it. And that's mental health 101. That's emotional awareness 101. And a lot of us are not taught that. We're taught anger. We're shown what anger can do and how it can be productive. And I'm not saying that we should lose that part of ourselves. You know, I think that there's always a time for us to sort of stuff it down, you know, once in a while. We have to do that. We have to show up. We have to fight. We have to use our emotions in a productive way, right? And there are times that we need to let off that steam. We need to process. We need to pick up the telephone of our emotions that are trying to tell us information. It's trying to give us a message. And if we don't listen to it, if we just take it as anger, we're missing out on the whole point.
Yeah, 1000%. And I think that's huge as well, because so many times we try to, block out that anger, block out that trauma, block out that fear by external sources, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's just doing things that, like you said, stuff it down. And obviously, like you mentioned as well, it's sometimes it's all right to stuff it down and you just go on with what you're doing. But it's also good to have those methods where you're able to release that anger through like meditation, working out, healthy forms. And I'm so sorry to hear about your mom, man. I can't even imagine that. I'm an only child. I'm somebody who's so close with my mom, and I can't even imagine that. And if the same thing happened to me and I was playing baseball, I would go into it. I'd probably be way better than I was, but like I would go into it like with full force. And I remember I actually played really, really well during baseball when I was angry, and I was looking at the pitcher and thinking in my mind, I'm gonna absolutely murder this baseball. And I remember my dad would always say, he's like, I told him this. I'm like, yeah, I'm gripping the bat like super hard. I'm like wicked angry. And he's like, well, wouldn't you want to be like loose? And I'm like, actually, weirdly enough, like it makes me feel like stronger. It makes me feel like I'm hitting the ball farther. And obviously at times, it wouldn't work out as well. But I mean, especially like you mentioned, I think it's interesting because you said this at the start, that you were somebody who didn't so much attach the sport to your identity and wanted to be more of a human, wanted to, be more of yourself and not fully attach the sport to your identity. I feel like as well, like you mentioned as well, like there's sometimes where not only people attach the sport to their identity, attach their ego of that sport to their identity, but also with school as well. Some people might go to these huge universities and have this degree and attach that sort of achievement to their ego, and then when things don't work out, they feel that sense of not being good enough, and that fear of not meeting people's expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's the concept of like not feeling good enough never made sense to me. Even just saying that felt like something for a long time. It felt like that was something that I don't know, you only talk about as a kid or something. Like, oh, I'm not good enough to do this or that. Like they don't like me because of this or that. But it's real. It's a human thing. It's an adult thing too. And I felt that myself, right? Like, cause I although I didn't have my identity caught up in sport, I had it caught up in a little bit of school. And I think what the school was really doing things the right way, you know, like going to a good school, going to a top 10 school, getting good grades, studying a major that has a track, doing things, pleasing others, you know? And that all were subconscious ways for me to up my self-worth because I would look good. I would get affirmation from people. Mm-hmm. I would feel good about myself because I thought that my worth came from other people and what they thought. And so what a crappy situation to be in, you know, like, because the only way to get rid of that and to start living your life and to be yourself is to piss a lot of people off, to upset people, to let some people down for what they expect of you. And those are the really uncomfortable parts of this journey, right? Oh, yeah. That no one likes to talk about. It's leaving people behind or moving on and doing your thing, which for a lot of people might people might say like, oh, you've changed or you're different now. And it's like, me. That's kind of the point, you know, like yeah. The point is for us to evolve and to grow and to learn about ourselves and evolve into new ways of being, right? Really just come back to ourselves. That's what it's really all about. We're not changing, you know, we're not diverting the path. We're actually coming back home. We're really just like, there's an awesome quote, like we're all just really walking each other home. We're all just here to show each other who we are, be mirrors for one another, and remind each other of who we really are so that we can really live that out and, you know, not people please, not be so focused on what other people are going to think. This conversation is having a theme. I feel like, you know, we're talking about like running your race, really. We're talking about coming back to what makes you you and what makes you good, you know, just innately, like you're already enough. You're already worthy. You're already who you are. You don't have to do anything or prove anything to be that.
100%. I think that idea, right when you said it hit me, I got a little bit choked up because it's so true of tying your worth to how other people look at your worth and you know, have that opinion, but it's so subjective, you know what I mean? It's not objective where like those are the facts. Like everybody has a different opinion of what your worth is. And I think when you tie that to it, because I mean, there's a lot of times where people could, you know, tie this to relationships. Like this girl will be into me because I have this accolade, I have this job, I look really cool online, you know, why wouldn't she be into me? But like, it's really just the biggest thing is having confidence in yourself and believing that you are worthy, that you are enough. And I think that's something that each of us struggle with every single day. Not only just with, you know, mental health issues, but potential insecurities, comparing ourselves to other people, looking on social media, seeing other people. And instead of just looking at ourselves and loving who we are at the core and being grateful for, you know, what we have around us. I think that's a really interesting concept.
It is. I mean, it's you know, we talk the term like mental health too, right? Like we think that all these things fall under the kind of stigmatized word mental health. Like I kind of wish we had like another word to use. Like I think of it as like your mindset, like your attitude, your frame of mind, because, you know, I think like mental health could mean a lot of different things, just like illness and health and nutrition is a wide spectrum. You know what I mean? Like you can be healthy and then you could be ill. But like mental health, I think there's like mental wellness. There's just mental upkeep. There's like, you know, just doing right by yourself. And that can spiral into mental health issues if you don't take care of yourself. You know, if you don't follow those intuitive hits, if you don't follow your heart and only live by other people's perspectives, yeah, that can lead you into some dark places. because
1,000%.
in those spaces, you feel that resistance, you feel that pressure, and that shows up in your body. A lot of people with chronic pain, I'm convinced that a lot of that is emotional. A lot of it is held on to beliefs or acting for other people. It's unresolved trauma. We hold in our bodies too. We hold on to things, and that tension shows up everywhere. And so when you can release, you can live a lot more freely. You can live your authentic truth.
1,000%. I think that's what we're all striving for at the end of the day. And I agree with you. The whole stigma of mental health, and it's funny. I had to explain to people when I sort of switched my podcast to talking more about mental health. They're like, "No, those are for people that should be in insane asylums." I'm like, I don't know if you realize, but everybody has mental health issues. Like, do you ever feel anxious? Do you ever feel depressed? Do you ever feel like we talked about before, like you're not good enough? Well, that kind of strings to it similarly, but it's all about your mindset, your perspective, that you are programmed by your adolescence, by society, and by your parents. But I want to take a second to talk a little bit about your company, World Class, and you have this really interesting method, the World Class method. I just want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the World Class method came out of my own experience. And what I mean by world class, by the way, is, I got to this point where I wanted to finally support world-class athletes and becoming world-class leaders outside of sport. But like really world class means a lot more than that. It means like true leadership is like vulnerable leadership. It's like putting your neck out there. It's putting your ego on the line. And that doesn't just mean like business leadership or team leadership. That means, living your authentic self. So it's all in what we're just talking about. That is world class to me. That's what world class means. And my method was born out of my own experience because I went through post-concussion syndrome for a number of years. Technically I still have symptoms of post-concussion syndrome. I wear glasses that actually correct my vision a little bit. Well, redirect my eyes to support the muscles that run my eyes. But that took me a long time to figure out that I had post-concussion syndrome. For a while there, for about a year and a half, I was very confused. I was very irritable. I had the symptoms of moodiness, headache, nausea, which at the time I thought was hunger. I didn't know what nausea felt like. I don't get very nauseous as a guy. And so I thought it was like hunger. But I was having all these like symptoms that would pop up after I'd work out or if I go to the grocery store or something. And I started to worry, like, am I going crazy? Do I have this brain disease that all the football players have, right? And I think every football player has probably had that thought come up, somewhere along in life. Like, am I just forgetting things or is this something worse?
Right.
Do I have a headache? Does everyone else have a headache like I do? Like, because I kind of constantly always have a little bit of a headache, but I don't know if that's normal or if everyone has that. Or if that's just something that I learned to endure, as a football player. All these questions run through your head as a former player. And so I had those symptoms. I had a bunch of them, and I got them checked out. Thankfully, at Northwestern, the medical staff was really, really generous of their time and energy and finances to support me with the best care possible when it came to figuring out what was going on. And they didn't have to do that, by the way. They didn't have to fund anything because this was not on my medical record. I had a diagnosed concussion, but the concussion that was giving me these symptoms was not actually on the record. It was something that happened in a game. I remember it, but I didn't diagnose it. I didn't come off the field. I was seeing double, but I just kept playing. But it turns out I did have post-concussion syndrome, and I was basically still seeing double from that concussion, and that was causing all those symptoms. And so I, through my own journey, like at the same time, I was also getting really passionate about the concussion problem and the mental health problem that was plaguing sports. Because this was a year after college, and in college I had learned in my master's program about the concussion issue. before a lot of people had really come to grips with what was going on and what was being hidden by certain organizations. And I was like, this is something I really want to put my work into. And so I went, and I was actually working for a concussion startup in Chicago when I found out I had post-concussion syndrome. Wow, so I was already at work. I was already like passionate about this. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur at some point and start a business around this. But I went and worked for a startup. That didn't work out. And so I had these two parallel lines of going through post-concussion syndrome myself, figuring out what the hell it was, figuring out what was CTE and what wasn't, or what could be or what couldn't be. And then figuring out ways to support guys, because no one was doing anything for people that had played. Right. There's a lot of talk and programming at like the NFLPA or different organizations. NCAA doesn't do anything when it comes to this that I know of. Most schools pretty much kick, like once you're done playing, like you're done playing. There's not much oversight or support. But I was really lucky at Northwestern where they really took care of me. And I was like, I got to get this sort of support out to more guys. I got to get not only the physical support, but the mental, emotional support that guys need. And so along these same two paths, I started finding things that would help me, that I knew would help me. One of the things was I was getting very moody. I started experiencing emotions that I didn't know was just part of normal life, like that anger I was talking to you about, or if this was due to my concussion symptoms, or if this was due to just playing a sport and having an outlet for anger all my life, but not having that anymore. So I decided that I wanted to explore like getting back into kind of like a locker room vibe with other guys. And I discovered the concept of a men's group. And a men's group is like a real life locker room, but without the sports and the beer and the trash talk and the locker room talk. It's like real life talk. It's how you doing, how you feeling, what's real for you right now in your life, what are your goals, what are you really passionate about, and how can I be a brother to you? And That's cool. The men's group that I joined really, really supported me in processing my own emotional experiences, really taking control and responsibility for my own emotions, and really developing some emotional intelligence around that, all this while, I thought I was a pretty emotionally intelligent guy, by the way. Like I thought I was pretty up there when it came to emotional intelligence, but I had a lot to learn. And I still was being a victim to my emotions in a lot of ways. And I still am, I think we all are at times. So, yeah. And so this is my long way of telling you what my method is, but then I'm telling you how I got there. All right. I had to go through the ringer myself, experience the deepest, darkest parts of post-concussion syndrome where there were times I'd come out of those treatments and be so symptomatic, because that's what treatment does. It makes you more symptomatic. Right. I would just want to destroy things. I would want to just jerk the wheel, just to cause some destruction, just to get that anger out of my system. And so that was starting to take shape in these destructive thoughts, which I thought to myself, this is not cool, obviously not cool. And I got to take this into my own hands. And so a leadership development program here in San Diego I went through really showed me that sort of, life or death situation. If you were dead right now, how would you feel? How would you feel about the way you lived your life?
It's interesting.
And that experience totally shifted my perspective, totally shifted the trajectory of the way that I own not only my emotions, but own my life and own my next move. And that ownership showed up in a symptom decrease. The next week I went back into my doctor's office and he said my eyes had gotten back to normal. And I felt way better. I felt like myself again because I had a new sense. I was just operating differently. I was living from a place of responsibility. I wasn't a victim to this thing anymore. I wasn't a victim to, I don't have the right steps or I don't have the right things to start a business. Once I finally got down to business and I started going after it, I felt better. And it showed physically and mentally. And I started to realize this is the real juice. This is the real root of what a lot of guys are going through. Yes, there might be some biological things that are going on, but there's this thing that we have in the medical science called the placebo effect. when you think you're taking something that's supporting you, you get better. It's accounted for in every single study, every double-blind study, every pharmaceutical drug accounts for the placebo effect. It happens everywhere. It happens every time where you take a sugar pill and you think it's something else and you feel better. And that doesn't tell me like, oh, I should go hand people sugar pills on the street. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I should focus on the possibilities, focus on what is possible. How can your mindset shift your physical? Because that's a perfect example of it, the placebo.
Right.
How can your mentality, it's called psychosomatics. How does my psychology impact my somatic experience, my biology? And that's what my method is based off of. It's based on psychosomatics, so it's based on your emotional experience, owning your emotions, owning your identity as a former athlete, owning your vision and your purpose as a former athlete, all the habits, all the emotions, all the relationships, and all the action that it takes to really live a life of purpose so that you can live fully on fire outside of sport.
100%. And that's so interesting. And I feel like even though it's become much more of a subject, in the past like 5 to 10 years, and it is mostly due to, people dying from CTE that people are talking about it. And it's unfortunate that I had to get to that point, but I think it's amazing all the stuff that you're doing. And, you're also an official provider for the Pro Football Hall of Fame Behavioral Health. You're also an ambassador for Athlete Care. You're also a board member on Beyond the Concussion. And I think it's amazing what you're doing, because I actually have one of my best friends got hit with a baseball in the face in high school, and he had really bad concussion for multiple months, and he still tells me that he has post concussion syndrome, to where really? he has similar issues of feeling anger in different points. He's on edge at sometimes, and forgets things easily. And for people who might be dealing with those types of symptoms, or think that they might be, what advice do you have for them, and how can they potentially get help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to actually recommend something to your friend, if he's open to it.
I think he would be.
It kind of depends on like the severity of the symptoms. It could be more chronic. It could be more kind of acute. But there's a couple of great resources. Obviously, I'm a coach, and I support with more of the mental side of things, and I can support with like some of the kind of more mechanical and biological pieces, like some simple like kind of brain hacks and like things you can do to up your brain health long term. So I'm definitely a resource, but I would say actually, when it comes to long-term prolonged post-concussion syndrome symptoms, there's a great program called Concussion Compass that my colleague Molly Parker founded, that has kind of a group environment, has a bunch of lessons, and they basically give you all the tools and direction for and community to solve your post-concussion syndrome symptoms in your local area. So it's like an online program, but they have the best network around the country to support you with the right care, because there's a lot of people that just do not understand concussion. There is so limited information. They didn't really start teaching on concussion until like recently in medical school. A lot of the old time doctors were never taught this in school. They like, it might have been like a small sliver of their education, because we didn't know much about the brain back then. We know a lot more now. We're learning a lot more, and I would say more younger doctors tend to have more of an up game when it comes to concussion, and they do a really good job vetting those doctors and those providers. So the cool thing about post-concussion syndrome is like a lot of people might think that you can't really heal from it, or you can't get back to your normal, but you can. And Molly in her program is proof of that. I'm obviously proof of that too. It's not just a mindset thing. It's also a health practitioner thing. So hopefully that helps.
100%.
Yeah, Molly Parker and the Concussion Compass program is a great resource.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely share that with him. And I think it's a subject that needs to be talked about a lot more. And actually, after doing my research of yourself before this interview, it actually inspired me to get a little bit more into it, learn a little bit more, try and be more of a voice about it. I've myself have never really dealt with a concussion, but I feel like I think it's a huge part of, athletes' mental health, and something that needs to be talked about way more.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when I started really researching the mental health space for athletes, like I hate to call it an industry, but it is one at this point. Um, this is not just a football problem. It's an athlete, issue. It just happens to be accentuated by, I think, the concussion issue in sports like football, hockey, soccer, sports where you get your bell rung, right?
Mm.
But this is a shared experience among all athletes, which is why my work really encompasses all athletes, especially men. So my work is really to get guys in a room together and talk about more than just sports, talk about life, talk about and connect with their emotions as superpowers, really as things that can help guide your life and guide your next moves. And that's something that every athlete can relate to. So.
100%.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you, man. And I've loved this conversation. I think we've talked about a lot of like really meaningful things, and a lot of things that are going to help out a lot of people. And for anybody who wants to learn more about yourself, learn more about the world class method, and sort of what you do to not only help athletes but just to help everyday people with mental health, where can they check you out?
Yeah, first and foremost is Instagram. So it's Q Williams _. And then my website is q-williams.com. It's q-williams.com. And actually on there, if there are athletes that are listening right now, or retired athletes, or any of you out there that want to get kind of a sneak peek into this work and do a little bit of self-reflection and self-assessment, I have this quiz on my website. If you go to q-williams.com/quiz, you'll see it right there. It's called the Life After Athlete Archetype Quiz. And it helps assign you with your athlete archetype. Think of it this way. On a football field, on a football team, there's always 4 captains, right? They usually span all across the field. It's not just the quarterback who's the captain, who is the leader of the team, but there's also folks that lead from the back, that lead from the sides, that lead in their unique way. So every team, every life, every relationship in real life can take on that same shape. And my invitation to everyone is to really do some self-reflection through this quick 2-minute quiz. Get an idea of how they show up in life after sports. Are they the offensive guard? Are they the quarterback? Are they the wide receiver? Are they the special teams? Are they the punter? What role are they playing in life after sport, and how can they really maximize that? And I give you some tools to do that. So check out the quiz. It's an awesome resource, and really speaks into everything we talked about today too.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, everybody go and check that out. And I think you can obviously learn a lot, not only from that quiz, but from Q's great resources on his website and also on his Instagram as well. So definitely go and check that out. But really appreciate you taking the time today, Q, and appreciate it, man.
Thanks a lot, Iggy. This has been great. A lot of fun, man. Appreciate
Perfect.
what you do.